Information reaches us faster when presented in a visually attractive format. And the next panel is doing just that, trying to get a message across to you. We have Rachita Taneja, whose webcomic Sanitary Panels touches upon themes of social justice. We also have Ashwini Menon, who formerly published cartoon strip Ecotism and is now the founder and principal designer at Ashwini Menon Visual Design Studio. We also have author and cartoonist and illustrator of the popular Green Humor series Rohan Chakravarti. edX's chief reporter Daniel Thimaya will chair the session.
Good evening and welcome. This is the New Indian Express with our platform E-Expressions. We're super psyched to bring to you the Dakshin Lit Fest 2020. This is a maiden venture. And during this time of the pandemic, we found that there is no better way to reach millions and millions of people except by bringing the power of literature right into their homes. And that is why this initiative has come about, and we're super psyched to bring this to you. Today, we have with us three people who I personally have had a lot of pleasure and a lot of sly laughter also going around, because I know that every time I send something that they've done to somebody on WhatsApp, it's super hilarious because people have such polarized opinions on cartoons and satire that sometimes I just send it for the heck of wanting to listen to what they have to say. And I suspect that most of their mornings and their afternoons are like that. So please join me in welcoming Rohan Chakravarti, Ashwini Menon, and Rachita Taneja. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. It's a real pleasure.
Thank you, Danny.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks,
Okay.
Danny.
So in no particular order, I'm just going to ask Rachita actually. It's a very popular notion that everybody who's a cartoonist always has this entirely strong bone of satire, and they really need to take a dig at anyone. Is that necessarily true from where you come from and the kind of work that you do?
Yeah, I mean, different cartoons offer different things. So I think satire is at the backbone of my cartoon. But as I know, like Rohan, for example, brings a lot more in terms of the visuals, in terms of like awareness building than my work. So my work is very heavily reliant on satire, on making fun of those in power. So yeah, at least personally, I think yes, my cartoon requires satire.
Okay. And Rohan, talking about the kind of work that you do, I mean, you're obviously, I would be far amiss and totally off field if I were to say that you look at anything beyond the environment, because your work is so heavily invested, and you obviously love the environment and where policy is at, and you take a very deep view of these things, and you have no problem with taking pot shots at everybody from the environment minister to individual ministers of states to people running corporations in cities every time they do something amiss. Where do you get your inspiration from? I mean, is it from a place far within, or do you rely on the news?
So to be frank, I don't know much other than environmental issues and wildlife, and that's what I draw about. I draw about what I know best, and yeah, it's too much for a cartoonist to take up every battle that's to be fought. So I've picked my own sphere of action, and yeah, I think. Where I derive my influence from is so not all my work is about environmental politics or governance. A lot of it is about wildlife in general and wildlife biology in particular. So yeah, most of my muse is wildlife. My muse is the natural world, and if anything wrong happens to wildlife in terms of governance, in terms of conservation being or policy being flawed, that's what I choose to draw about.
And Ashwini, where does your inspiration come from? I mean, a lot of people talk about being inspired by different things. Some people are I'm walking on the road and I'm reading something and I saw something, and that's what led to this comic strip. And other people are more intrinsic. They draw from within something they felt very strongly about. Where does your inspiration come from?
Right. So my most of my cartoons revolve around sustainable development issues in India and things that I see in the city that I live in. As through my childhood, I've been a wildlife lover, but it was just 6-7 years back that I got accustomed to the plight that the wildlife is in, like the state in which our country's wildlife is in today. So I'm a little shy person when it comes to having a debate with people or confronting people up front. So I silently started drawing these cartoons and I published them on Facebook, and that's how the journey began. So I think because I'm not that great an orator, the skill came through making these cartoons and speaking my mind through them.
That's interesting because a lot of the best cartoonists in the world were known to be, classic introverts. Studies in psychology say that. But Rachita, is that something that you agree with? I mean, is that a personality type, or is that just a misnomer?
I mean, personally, I'm an introvert. I can pretend very well to be an extrovert, but yes, I'm an introvert and I am terrified of public speaking generally. So it's much easier, like Ashwini said, to let the comics speak for me.
Rohan, what about you?
I don't think Rajita is an introvert at all. Speaking about
Well,
myself,
And
yes.
that's how good
I think
I am at pretending.
I think either she's got ace acting skills or she's fooled you all along. I don't know which one it is.
Which of it that is, but she's also a very good public speaker. I've listened to her talks, so yeah, it's a farce. Speaking about myself, yes, I've always been introverted. I can count on my fingertips the number of friends I have in life. So
And Ron, I mean, does that ever factor in? I mean, obviously, there was that cartoon that you did of Mr. Javadekar once that was very, very popular. In fact, it went terribly viral. What was it called?
no, so I operate on a very different principle than Rachita's. I don't think it's the job of a cartoonist to take political sides. I I have follow a simple principle. I believe that a cartoonist is never a leftist or a rightist, but purely a sadist. So, which is what I take pleasure in offending people in power. And no matter what kind of government is in power, I will, continue to do that. So the BJP happens to be in power now, and therefore the butt of my jokes. But my career began before 2014. My series began in 2010 when the Congress government was in power, and a lot of my
And
cartoons.
you took them apart. I remember that was also very enjoyable.
Right. So a lot of my cartoons were directed at not just conservation, but even economic policies that neglected funds for conservation. And yeah, that's how my career began. But it's sadly not noticeable to people anymore because of the cartoons I come up with these days. And yeah, I mean, as long as misgovernance continues, this kind of cartooning will also continue.
So that's something to look forward to. Ashwini, what about you?
Yeah, so
Do you ever think about the politics of it before you get into it? Do you stop before you put that out, before you click publish? And do you think, okay, what am I going to get called today? Should I not? Is that a thought that you have?
yes, initially I did think a lot about it, and I had 4-5 people review my cartoons before I published them, and they said, no, this is going to sound a little too political, and I was very timid in that sense. But it is people like works like Rohan's and Rachita's and many cartoonists who really speak what needs to be told. I have gathered some courage, but my focus is a little more on the people, because the government of a country, I feel, is a major reflection of what the society is and the kind of society we are okay living in with, right? So, like for example, we have, like when you talk about a city like Mumbai, the most environment friendly thing you can do is to take care of your waste and take care of your consumption patterns. And we had a session with a BMC official. She's this young BMC official, and she said that don't put all the burden just on us, because even within the BMC it is very difficult for us to get things done. But when you as people come forward and say, no, we want our wet waste to be segregated, or we want our dump yard to be taken care of, then things will get better. So I think it works both ways. And with respect to my cartoons, I think I focus on the people's behavior, because that is what I see around me. Like you said, how can you speak up in front of friends? I fight that all the time within me, especially when I go for a wedding. I'm really happy for that person getting married, but I just hate the way I see disposables being used, or an extravagant celebration in the name. And this gifting, when you gift because you're supposed to gift it to people, and people don't like things they are receiving, neither do they like the fact that they're spending so much. So I really don't get the point of most of the things happening, because people don't question why they're doing what they're doing.
I think that the power to question is what drives a lot of people, and I think it's interesting to think about it this way. I mean, very often the kind of hubris that a writer has when they think about how much they can affect change, and the power of the editorial, as they call it. And yet, when you break that down and look at social media, it's sometimes a simple comic panel that can have much more impact. simply because of the amount of reach that it has. Rachita, of course, you have your claim to fame, your rise through web comics and the use of initially Facebook, and today I dare say Instagram has really propelled the way that sanitary panels has really taken off. Uh, how has the medium been for you? I mean, what has social media done? I know Rohan and Ashwini have spent a lot of time publishing in papers, and there's been a good print quotient going. But with your work and with your experience with the digital medium, how has it been for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's been good. I mean, social media is great because you're a consumer and you're a producer of content, right? Like you can be either and you can keep switching. Obviously, there's a lot of privilege involved in order to be able to get an audience at the end of the day. But I got lucky. I think I was a bit early. I was one of the early adopters of webcomic as a form. So I think I got lucky in that way. And like Rohan said, like I'm a campaigner. I see myself as a human rights campaigner, and sometimes less as a webcomic artist. So I was using Facebook as a platform before the BJP came into power to campaign against the Congress as well. I remember making fun of Manmohan Singh in a variety of ways, including visual ways. So the reason that I started doing sanitary panels on Facebook was because I was used to Facebook as a platform for campaigning. And sanitary panels became one of the tools in my toolkit to affect change. And so what I try often to do is to direct people towards actionable things. So if there is a petition that's already being run by a campaigning organization, I'll direct people to that. If there is something else that people can be more useful in, I will direct people towards that. But one of the drawbacks, obviously, of these platforms is, and more recently, like you said, Instagram has been, I've been quite active on Instagram, much more than Facebook. And one
I
of
think
the
that's the
things,
story of most of our lives these days.
yeah. So one of the things that is frustrating about these platforms, obviously everyone knows about the algorithm changes and the fact that your reach is entirely dependent on these platforms. But another thing is that these platforms are designed by mostly cis-het white men in Silicon Valley. So it doesn't cater to us as much as it caters to white creators. And also like it is restricting in ways that, I usually used to have like a vertical format for my comic. Now I have to do it more horizontal so that it looks better on Instagram. So there are times when I am adjusting to the platform and I'm making content based on the platform rather than the other way around, like rather than the platform
Absolutely.
giving me a place to share my content as it is. So yeah, those are some of the drawbacks and some of the advantages of having these platforms.
But what has it done for you? I mean, like you said, you were one of the earliest onboarders with the webcomic revolution in India, and you gained a lot of followers very, very fast, right? And that's sort of what took your campaigning up there, if you
I wouldn't
remember.
put it in such fancy words. I don't think any revolution business happened. I think I was just privileged enough to have a bit of an audience at the beginning. And yes, it grew significantly because the stuff that I was saying was
what a lot of people were thinking. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. And also because, I knew that the visual format is much better for platforms like Facebook and Instagram. So I started using them a lot more with a lot of my focus has mostly been on the words and the concepts, because let's face it, my visual style is not very, it's very basic, right? It doesn't take too long for someone to adjust their eyes to what is happening.
No, it's instant. It's right there. I get what you're saying.
Exactly.
It's minimalist.
So it's very simple and people go to the words directly. And I think that works in my favor, especially if I'm making some kind of satirical comment or something that's sassy or insulting or, that kind of.
Which it almost always is. Rohan, Rachita was talking about how she points people in the right direction, and she actually looks at stuff that's actionable. Now you're a guy who also deeply reads into policy before you ever sit down and trash somebody. And I know that you're a guy who takes that very seriously because you're a guy who researches the hell out of things. I remember somebody told me this. Do you also work towards action as the end point of all of this, or some form of action?
In my day-to-day life as a person, yes, but not as an activist. I don't call myself an activist or a conservationist. I'm just a cartoonist doing his job. And I don't think I'm in a position to take larger roles up at this stage. I want to focus on my art and keep it relevant and as helpful to certain causes as I can.
And so you pick and choose those causes, obviously. And how exactly do you I mean, what sort of criteria do you apply to? What causes make the cut and what causes don't? Is that a personal thing?
It is very personal, yes. So it has to affect me in order to for me to draw about it. But it also depends on the gravity of a certain situation. For example, I drew something about the farmers' bill. It wasn't really under the purview of my series, but it was a very grave matter, and therefore I choose to explore how that issue uh, conflicts or confluences with environmental issues in the country, and then pick my stand and my artistic view on that particular matter.
Ashwini, what about you? Have you ever seen the impact of your comics? Take it further, take it beyond the panel, as it were.
Right. So, yeah, I try to live a sustainable life as much as possible on a personal level, but I can't say that I've seen measurable impact as such. I do see a lot of conversations happen because of someone reading one of my strips, or a few people writing back to me. But I also want to, bring to light the fact that each of us is born with a certain, a certain skill set, right? And the issues that we feel about, it is best that we try to work towards them through those skill sets. Like instead of me going and helping on ground on something where I'm not really capable, and if I'm more powerful with my pen and paper, I'd rather stick to that. Because there was a time when I started learning about the issues, and I hated the fact that I am a designer or an artist. I felt that, oh, this is just what I can do. Why can't I invent something that can take care of most of the things? But then I reminded myself the power of communication design. Like, whatever problems we try to solve, they cannot be solved by any particular single professional or a single field of expertise. It has to be a system working together, where communication design really is very important. Like, the very fact as to why I quit my full-time job and came to use design for things like this, is because I saw that the most creative ads are about shampoos and toothpaste, and why can't that creativity sell things that actually matter to people?
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, I mean that's extremely important. When you think about the potential that's out there, it's scary to think about where we could be if we actually applied ourselves in the right directions. Rachita, have you ever thought about long forming what you do in that sense, if I could put it that way?
I don't think I have the attention span to long form, to be very honest. I don't know if my style caters to long form either. So I have thought about it. I have done comics that could like be seen as a part of a series, but not as much as I like my current, short, succinct, minimalist kind of style.
I'm just curious, how long does it take for you to do one? You're going to shock
It's
me with the answer, I know, but yeah, go ahead.
it actually entirely depends on how long it takes for me to write it. The writing is the most difficult part, or like the concept is the most difficult part. The drawing, as you can probably tell, doesn't take very long.
And are you somebody who has like a trash can full of like, okay, this isn't working, or are you somebody who digitally sort of fleshes it out?
I flesh it out digitally.
Okay, great. Ron, what about you? What is your creative process like? How long does it take?
Well, I have like 10 notebooks of rejected comics in that cupboard.
Oh yeah, that's a
So yeah,
huge
I'm
copy.
more of a paper person. All the ideation begins on paper, and yeah, I reject a lot. I tend to be a very harsh critic of what I draw. Very few comics that I've produced have amused me. Thankfully, they've amused more people than myself so far.
So is that your yardstick? If I don't laugh at it, I'm not going to put it out there.
Absolutely, but I'm learning to be a bit more lenient with passing time and age.
Ashwini, what about you? What's your yardstick? I mean, how long does it take you? What's your process like?
Yeah, I always have ideas being written down in my sketchbook as and when they pop. And sometimes the deadline is on a Friday and it will be Thursday night, and you still don't know what you want to make. Or sometimes ideas come at an instant. I think as creative people, we just have to keep our eyes and ears open all the time. You never know where you see what and what can, light an idea in your mind. But funnily for me, like, I always wondered what would happen if I run out of ideas for this particular cartoon strip, like the egotism. But I felt that would be good news. If I don't have bad things to report about, that is really good news. I hope I run out of ideas at least for this
I
particular
think that's a very
comic.
idealistic way of looking at life, but I think it's a great way to look at life. Rachita, I must ask you. I mean, you did touch upon how much you get trolled and how much people say whatever. I suspect it was more on Facebook than Instagram. Though, Instagram seems fairly nicer these days. I think they filter out the comments. No, it doesn't
No,
show, at least. Sometimes this is weird filter on the comments. It doesn't show the nasty stuff. Maybe it shows you the nasty stuff. Like the arbitrary viewer probably isn't seeing it. But I have to ask, and this is something that I end up asking a lot of people, because it's very compelling. As much as you say I don't really care about what people say, there are some things that really stick with you, maybe for the right reasons and for the wrong reasons. So what's the nicest thing anyone said to you about a comic strip of yours or a panel
I'd,
of yours?
I'd have to think about that. I don't know off the top of my head. It's probably like you made me think about politics differently. It's like, great, wow, I can't do that with my friends, but great that I could do it with you. But yeah, no, I'd have to think about it. But Instagram is horrible. It's a horrible place for trolls as well. It's as bad as Facebook. It's as bad as Twitter. And what you can't see is also the DMs that you receive, which are generally which are more colorful than what you receive on your comment section.
Oh, I'd imagine. But let me ask you the other thing though. What's the worst thing that anyone's ever said to you about the comic panel that's made you laugh? And remember, kids probably watch this.
Yeah, I mean, look, colorful insults and all are boring at this point. So the funniest thing is when people say, like, show me pictures of FIRs they filed against me where they've, written sedition 5 times or something. And I'm like, this is not going to go anywhere. You can tell this, I can tell this.
I bet you sit and do like a spell check on it and return it. You're that kind of person, aren't you?
No, I mean, spelling is not something I mess with, because it's also like a classist thing for me to assume that everyone is it's like English language is not everyone's first language. So
Yeah, absolutely. That's a given.
I'm not going to spell check. So, but it's just really funny when people try and say that this comic offends my religious sentiments in XYZ way, and it's like, how though? How fragile is your religion?
So, Ron, do you engage with trolls? I mean, what's your policy on trolls?
Uh, Rachita should do a class for people like me on how to keep your sanity intact despite being on social media. I do very badly with trolls. If I do make the mistake of engaging with trolls, it ends up in a fight. So these days, because of I'm losing patience, and it's better for me to not respond to.
So, have you reached that point where you just smile and wave?
I just dissociate and disconnect with on a bad day. But yeah, I mean I'm male, so I have the privilege of trolling not being overtly personal. That's something
I would completely agree. I think there's something extremely compelling in what you just said.
yes.
But what's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to you about a strip that you put out there?
Marry me.
I don't know if I should ask you what you said.
I'm kidding, but I did get that comment. But something that's more meaningful than that was that there was this guy from Peru who wrote to me saying that he was considering buying this monkey called a marmoset as a pet, and he read my
Okay.
comic about the pet trade, and he refrained from doing so. So that's one instance where my work could actually save the life of a wild animal, and I would really like more tangible impacts like this one.
I think that's really heartwarming if you ask me. Ashwini, what about you? What's the nicest or the funniest thing anyone's ever said to you after reading a strip of yours?
I think there was this school girl. She was in the 9th grade, and she wrote saying that she looks forward to reading them every Sunday, and she told that it inspires her to do something in this field moving on. And the fact that she was so young is what it really melted me, because it's like, especially on print, it's a one-way medium. You really don't know if people are getting it. So that
That's
mail
true.
is something I remember.
I'm going to leave you all with just one question, and this is sort of linked to what we talked about a little earlier. We talked about criticism, we talked about satire, we talked about fun, and of course we talked about making Rowan laugh. It seems to be tougher than most people would imagine. Does it ever worry you that the government or people in power might at some point want to intimidate you, or does it sometimes keep you up at night wondering how bad could it get? Rachita, does it ever happen to you? Is that something that has ever occurred to you?
Yeah, no, 100%. Every day, all day, every day, at night, in the morning. It's a very, like, it's one of the go-to threats that trolls on the internet make, which is like, there are some threats that are a bit up in the air, but there are some very specific threats, like I'll get you arrested, or I will come after you and kill you, or I will come after your family. These kinds of things. So these are all very real threats. That is just like constantly in the back of my mind, and it's in the back of minds of anyone who dares to criticize this government, much more than any previous like target that I have made a comic about.
And Rohan, this is not about this government, but I just speak about people in power. Does it worry you that you do what you do on a daily basis, and has anything ever happened that has upset that frame of mind?
Again, I'm going to refer to Rachita's work. She just drew a cartoon about Modi hiding behind a wall as the farmers march
Yeah,
towards him.
there's a bloodbath thing happening
Yeah,
outside.
so
Yeah,
when I worry about political crackdown on my work, I adopt that posture, Modi's posture, and hide behind a wall and think about the future. So yeah, it does worry me a lot. Especially now with a lot of creative content coming under the purview of the Information Bureau.
information. Yeah.
It's just a matter of time before the next thing happens. But at the same time, while I'm frightened, it's also an exciting challenge, because it's kind of triggering an evolutionary arms race between the creator and the government. And if you are smart enough as a satirist, you're going to find
Trying
a
to
way
escape censorship. Yeah,
you're going to find a way around it. So that's what I aspire to be in future.
that's the challenge. Ashwini, your last word. Are you worried about censorship on any level, or freedom of expression, or any of that?
If you see the picture, if you read more and more, the situation can be very grim, and you feel very hopeless about the state you are in. So I'm trying to I've really told myself in the past few months to focus on the good news and try to dig in and read about all these small efforts of positivity that are happening in our society. And I just request, I want people to not take things personally. I don't know why people have such personal attachments to their leaders. It should be about the work they're doing, and that's why they're elected. And that is when this we versus them is going to stop. Because we can't win the battle if both are on two extremes, and we should make it less personal and more about the work that is being done. Yeah.
I think don't take it personally.
Kind of personality that politicians have, so that people could associate, very personally with us rather than politics. Yeah, sadly that is.
I think don't take it personally should be the name of the autobiography of someone you admire very much, Rachita. Anyway, on that note, thank you very much. I look forward to a lot more humor, a lot more satire, and a lot more fun from you guys. Keep up the great panels. Keep up the humor. I'm really totally looking forward. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you, Rachita. Thank you, Rohan. Thank you, Ashwini. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
And
Danny.
I'm looking forward to a lot more of it. Thanks, guys. Take care.
See you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us this evening. We hope you enjoyed the session. To catch your favorite authors live and check out the full schedule, you can log on to